If we take a look at the Skywalker saga, we can see that these movies do in fact have a lot of flaws, especially within the sequel trilogy era by Disney and Lucasfilm. Of course, we're focusing on both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker by Rian Johnson and JJ Abrams. This is Mike Zero. Make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, the one thing about Disney Star Wars is that we do know that these movies had a consistency issue, ranging from The Force Awakens all the way to the end with Episode 9, right? There were consistency issues. One thing that was not really lacking in the prequels or the originals, at least in my book, in my point of view, George Lucas did an excellent job with maintaining consistency within the Star Wars movies before Disney took over Lucasfilm. Now, the thing that really does stand out to me a lot is, of course, the fan backlash over The Last Jedi. And we do know that back in 2018, Bob Iger called it a frequency issue because of why Solo: A Star Wars Story failed at the box office. Meanwhile, really, it all had to do with the fan backlash against The Last Jedi and exactly how Disney was handling the character of Luke Skywalker in the current Star Wars lore. The thing that really does surprise me the most about all of this, however, though, has to do specifically with Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson of all people, as well as, of course, director and writer JJ Abrams of The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker. Now, what's really interesting about all of this, of course, is that now that both Disney and Lucasfilm are finished with The Rise of Skywalker, they are focused on their new Star Wars trilogy of films, as well as their new Star Wars universe. It's noted that Disney's new CEO, Bob Chapek, is making some major changes over at Lucasfilm to develop a better future for Star Wars as a brand and for the Star Wars community. However, during and after the premiere for The Rise of Skywalker, many interviews were given to the creators of the sequel trilogy, including director Rian Johnson. When questioned about the sequel trilogy and the shocking reveal that Snoke was nothing more than a clone, Johnson went on to explain that he had actually developed that idea before The Last Jedi was even released, and that Johnson was going to use the Snoke clone reveal in his other cut for The Last Jedi during the original drafts that he wrote for the movie, and even discussed this with Kathleen Kennedy. Now, it's explained that Johnson stated that he had discussed this idea with both Colin Trevorrow and JJ Abrams before Episode 9 was even released, and that Rian Johnson says it was his idea. However, when JJ Abrams was questioned about the Snoke clones in the movie, JJ went on to state that that this was actually an idea by George Lucas and a last-minute decision for the fans to enjoy that would be based off of the Dark Empire comic series. It said that when JJ was questioned if this idea was in the cards by past creators like Rian Johnson or Kathleen Kennedy, JJ went on to state that no, this was all his idea from the very end of shooting for The Rise of Skywalker by making Snoke a clone. Not just that, but also Rian Johnson stated at one point in time that he had discussed the return of Palpatine in the sequel trilogy before Episode 9's release, where of course later on JJ was questioned that he stated that Palpatine was all Kathleen Kennedy's idea last minute right when JJ Abrams hopped on board, and that this was only discussed between himself, Kathleen, and George Lucas. So once again, you can see that Rian Johnson, is not very much of an honest person when it comes to his creative ideas or what he had actually discussed with Kathleen Kennedy. And a lot of this is all, of course, a shaky consistency issue between different creators. And I think it's one of the main reasons as to why, in The Last Jedi, we did not get the Knights of Ren. Now, of course, there is a in-universe answer as to why the Knights of Ren were not present in The Last Jedi, but keep in mind that was actually done after the movie's release. It's because the Knights of Ren were going over to the unknown regions, seeking Palpatine. Kylo Ren sends them out to look for Palpatine, sends them on a mission, only for the Knights to return to tell exactly, what's going on over in the unknown regions. Now, of course, that was a part of the original cut of The Rise of Skywalker. The thing about Rian Johnson here is that he's claiming that, of course, the Snoke clones were his idea and he was going to use that for, of course, The Last Jedi. Meanwhile, of course, he said that he discussed this with Kathleen Kennedy, where JJ states that this was not discussed with anybody else before the release of The Rise of Skywalker. So you can see that Rian Johnson, it really seems like that he's trying to come off as more of a visionary or of a pioneer of sorts of specific key ideas that would be implemented into these Star Wars movies based off of the original comics from Star Wars Legends or even some of the books out there. Now, mind you, okay, the snow clones were a general theory back then when The Last Jedi released. A lot of fans had that idea, but nonetheless, Rian Johnson and JJ Abrams, answers here are very much different, and you can see the consistency issues as to why there are problems between The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and of course, The Rise of Skywalker, and why at times they feel very separate and pretty much disjointed. So, with that being said, guys, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.